Okay, hi everybody. You're very welcome to our latest book club chat at the GAA Museum. My name is Julianne, and thanks to everyone again for joining us and staying with the book club. It's been really popular, and thanks for sending in all your comments and suggestions as well. This month we have been reading a very different kind of book for us. I suppose it's nearly a compendium of very interesting stories together to make, I suppose, an analysis of a funny time in a sports person's life. A great idea for a book and very enjoyable read. So I'd like to welcome the author, Damian Lawler, to chat with us this morning. You're very welcome, Damian.
Thank you, Julianne. Good to be here.
Thanks for taking the time. I'm very interested to get. It's a lot to take in. I find myself going back over some of the stories this morning. It's like I've read 14 books or so. So
It
yeah.
felt like that to write it as well, I can tell you.
I suppose we'll start with the obvious questions. If you want to tell us a little bit about yourself first, and kind of how the book came about.
Yeah, well, my name is Damian Lawler. I'm from Tipperary. I'm living up here in Naas for the last number of years with my wife and family. But I'm never a million miles away from Tip. I suppose that's a huge part of my identity. And I suppose if I wasn't in this job, I would be probably involved with teams 24/7. That's the big passion I have in my life. And I've helped out in the past with Tip football and my own club, Killer One. And I'm up here now in Naas, helping out underage again, Julianne. So that's a big thing. I played all right. I was never much use, but I played away. I played for years. Killer One McDonald's is my club, and I suppose for the next generation will be up here, keeping an eye on Killer One, helping out when I can, and helping out in Naas here too. So I'm a journalist this long time. I started off with the Nina Guardian, Tip FM, Tipperary Star. I went off to college and I did a degree in marketing in IT Carlow. Did 4 years there. Went up to do 2 years in NUI Galway. I did a dip and a master's in journalism up there. Started working with the Examiner. Went to the Irish Daily Star. Went to the Sunday Independent. Went working with Air Sport, Sky Sport, and I'm with RTE now. So that's kind of my job. For being RTE since the pandemic hit, Julianne, full time. I've been associated with them for nearly 20 years, but my job then is kind of bit of news during the week, bit of radio, and then live broadcast at the weekend. And it's a great job and I love it.
It's a very well-positioned career to, I suppose you've probably met an awful lot of sports stars, which is probably how the book came about, is it?
Yeah. Well, sure, that's it in a nutshell. And you build up so many relationships on the way, and you're on a great basis with these people. You're at some of their weddings, their families. They tell you stuff that they trust you. You know what's going on off the field, and never mind on the field. Like most of the interviews I do, Julianne, to be honest with you, for the last 10, 15 years, you'd very rarely mention the games or whatever happened. Like, I mean, I'm more into the personality and the personal side of things. And then I kind of I kept reading stories about how difficult players found it to leave the WhatsApp group when they retired.
Yeah, that was interesting.
That was the one that struck a chord with me. And then I kind of, you'd meet people. I'll tell you what happened straight out. All the people I interviewed as players first time around, I'm so bloody old now. They're all managers now. And you were meeting them in Croke Park or Thurles or wherever around the country. And, you mightn't have seen them for 10 years, but the old link and the old relationship was still there. And I just said to myself, God, what have they done? Like, and, probably felt a bit guilty that I'd lost touch with some people as well. But that's the way of the world.
That's life. Yeah.
Yeah, that's like, you can't stay in touch with everybody. And it's a big organization. And I kind of went at it then, like that WhatsApp thing. I think Paul Flynn and Bernard Brogan both did articles about leaving that WhatsApp group and the psychological trauma of that. So I went from there, Julianne. And you know what? Because I'm identifiable with GAA, it's all I know really. But said for the crack, I try other sports here. So I kept the GAA down to 2 or 3. And as you said, we have about 14 different. And you know what? It was refreshing because I'll call it straight here. A lot of the players and athletes in the GAA are trained not to deal with us, not to talk to us, not to give anything away. And I just found it refreshing to go to your athletes from different spheres who talk so openly.
The soccer players in particular, or they gave you a lot of insight, didn't they?
They did, and I had to work hard at that. I have all my research done, and you met them face to face and you established a trust. But yeah, they had they were bloody taken away at 15, 16 years of age and left to cope on their own. And yeah, but I got great. The likes of Paul McGee, the likes of Shane Supple, the likes of Niall Quinn. It was a pleasure to interview those people, and I broke it up into 4 sections. I'm
I
reading
was
back
going to
over it now.
ask you
Yeah.
kind of the reason, or how did that come about?
Yeah, I got mightily offended anyway. 1 second, Julianne.
All right.
I got mightily offended at one stage. Basically, my publisher was saying to me, like, your chapters are too long. And I was there, hang on a second now. If you can't have a book that you can read and you can sink yourself into it, in this day and age, like, what's left?
Yeah.
Like, social media has your attention for 20 seconds. Like,
Yeah.
nearly every article you read is 800 words maximum. And I kind of said to him, where are you going with this? Like, I'm going to give you a book that you can dip in and out of. But he said, no, your chapters are too long. So I broke it up that way in 4 sections, really. Like, we have the soccer section with Kevin Doyle, Paul McGee, Niall Quinn, and Shane Supple. And then rugby, like, big movement into what a player does in rugby after their career is over. So that was an obvious one to go down to. I wanted to bring in the individual athlete as well, Julianne. So I brought in jockeys, golfers, the GAA players, boxers, and then finished off with I suppose, not enough attention has shone on female sport and women's sport, but now that's been rectified now. But I wanted to, and Lindsay Pete was an interesting one there because I thought she'd never retire, and I felt guilty. I felt guilty putting her in the book because when I started it, I said, "Jesus, she's going to go any
She's
day
still
now."
going. Yeah.
I'd say, to be honest with you, she could still be playing.
Isn't it interesting?
Yeah, and I look at it, I think that it's interesting what you said, that you dipped in and out of it.
Mm-hmm.
The target for me was to keep the book flowing. You could dip in and out because I know the way people's attention spans are these days, that they don't take on as much as they used to, and leave down the book, come back to it 2 days later and pick up again and still get a good read out of it. And that's what I wanted. So I wanted a bit of variety, and my wife was always pushing me to do non-GAA stuff, and that's probably where I branched out a little bit. Now I still stayed in sports, so I wasn't too adventurous.
Well, I know it was, and it's interesting, like, because when I thought there'd be more GAA in, and it didn't matter, like, from the book club point of view, we've done some that aren't GAA at all, but it was actually great because they'd a lot in common, all of the athletes, and then quite different, as you say, the individual athlete. Like, I found the Sonia Sullivan one very interesting, like, she nearly would still be going too, and the fact that she was trying to contend
5K runs.
Yeah, and like the difference between, like, she couldn't understand how people could just run socially. I thought that was so interesting.
And what you said there now really struck a chord with me. The big thing for me, I had a load of worries. Like, you write a book, like, you write up your worries on a sheet and you try and go through them one by one. And one worry I had, Julianne, was repetition. And would all their stories be the same? Now, amazingly, I don't think they did. I think that's one charge I could have been accused of, but I think I got away with it. Like, that's because
they're totally different stories, even though the common, I suppose, common worries, common fears, common problems facing them. And, there was words like, their structure was gone, the adrenaline was gone, those type of things. But then they all dealt with it in such different ways. And like, you open with the awful, like the worst, I suppose, thing that
the worst
could
case
happen.
scenario.
Yeah, the worst case. And then, Donica's experience was so different, or
Donegal O'Callaghan and Tommy Bowe, like, it's like as if you don't even remember that they played rugby now.
They're nearly known better now.
They are, and look start with the ending. Like, I depicted a dark scenario, and I'll be honest with you, I think I needed to get the message home very, very quickly. This is how serious it is. This is how low you can get once your identity is snatched away. And Paul McGee was in a dark place, but his career was only taken off and then suddenly it was taken away. How do you deal with that when you don't have the tools? So I wanted to put in a kind of a stark opener, but then I contrasted with Tommy Bowe straight away, who basically hit our TV screens and has never looked back. So I think that parallel was running the whole way through. So the avoiding repetition was a concern, making sure that every story, there was a parallel, symmetry between positive and negative, and not turning anybody off because I went too far in one direction. And then making sure people could stop reading, put the book down, and then pick up the next day. And then that there was good variety. They were nearly the things. And then I suppose I had maybe 8 stories done, Julie, and I felt that might be enough now, because if you go any further, you avoid repetition. But my great publisher, Campbell, came back to me again. He said, you need more high-profile names here. And again, I was there. I don't. The best stories come from the lesser-known people.
Yeah, like the Supple story was very interesting, and I
Yeah,
didn't know a
yeah,
whole lot
yeah.
about him. Yeah.
Yeah, and he said to me, you've put a huge amount of work into this book. If you want this to go well, you're going to need some high-profile people here. So he was right. I went off and I got Sonia, Paul Carberry, Niall
Yeah.
Quinn, and Tommy, and and they probably, Jesus, not one of those stories was weak either, and that's down to them, and
No.
I'm blessed with it. But I think the final thing I'll say then in this one is I overwrote it, Julianne, and then I spent hours and weeks and months cutting it back, and just to make sure that I was short and sharp.
Tight.
And
Yeah.
I'm going to do the same now with this one I'm currently writing. Just 80,000 words is probably a minimum you need for a book, but 110,000 is maximum. And I'm learning as I get older, the less you have, the better. The power of words should be good enough at 80,000 words at this stage.
And is that a kind of a thing that you've learned from journalism? Like the stories in the book remind me of those old, long reads in,
Yeah.
that aren't always now in the Sunday papers anymore. Is that, would you have, when you were writing for the Sunday Independent, would you have done that, written longer and edited it back? Is that
Oh,
a style or?
yeah. At the time with the Sunday Indo, you were allowed to write maybe 3,000 word features. And
Yeah.
if in fairness to John Green, the sports editor there, he'd say to you, if it's good enough, let it go, and you got that. But I think I'm looking back here, probably can't see, but there was a book with Liam Dunn, I Crossed the Line. That's the
Yes.
first book I wrote. And looking back in hindsight, that was 110,000 words. And I could easily have compacted a few chapters near the end in that, and that's a lesson you learn as you get older. Like Liam was big on picking his all-time greatest team or greatest all-star team and stuff like that. And I think I was looking back at that now, be more ruthless and say, no, Liam, we can have it as a little
List at the back
memorandum
or
at the
something.
back,
Mm.
But yeah, and then I had to go from that scenario, then writing 3,000 words a week, to working for Air and Sky and getting 30 seconds.
A
So that's a
soundbite.
massive,
Yeah.
massive learning point for me as well. So I've basically, you'll find it's hard to believe now, but over the years I've learned to shut up and actually listen.
Yeah.
I know you'll find that hard to believe, but seriously, when I'm on air, like I just prod them along and shut up and just listen and get all their insight across. Because I don't think you never have more than 3 minutes at any given time to get your point across or get your insight. Whereas with a Sunday paper, you had 3,000 words, you had nearly
Yeah.
2 broadsheet pages, so massive difference. Like,
Massive difference, but it is a lovely style for a book, and it lends itself to, this style, and you're really getting in because, those stories couldn't have been told any shorter. You mentioned a few minutes ago trust, and I suppose that was one of my questions. Like, how did you could go about this on a very top level, and this is what I did, but I left my game that I played and now I work here. It could have been a very different, lighter book, I suppose, but not as enjoyable and not as emotive. How did you kind of approach the interviews? I know you probably maybe had a few friends beforehand that you probably
mm,
started
mm.
with, but they really opened up to you, and it's a very emotional and probably undiscussed. I think Sonia described it as a taboo topic. How did you go about that?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I did an awful lot of research.
Yeah.
Um, remember talking. Gary's a good golfer, a great golfer. Was one maybe career win away from just that would have got him exemptions to
Mm.
tours for the rest of his life. But I remember talking about it on RT2 FM at one stage, Julianne, and I just said when I was flirting with the idea of writing the book, I sent him a text and said, look, I'm thinking about writing this. Would you have a chat with me? What was your retirement like? And he just sent me back a text, car crash.
Wow.
And I said, would you be willing to talk to me about that? And he did. And he opened it all out. And like I'll be honest with you, like I felt that there was some stuff there that maybe, so I ran it by him and he goes, yeah, that's grand. Jesus, that reads well, doesn't it? And that's nearly as much as he changed, and
Yeah.
if you think I think that got me on to a really confident run, Julianne, that I could do this. And I remember talking to Nicky Simmons, the hockey player, soon after. Jesus, Nicky couldn't handle the initial burst that retirement bought her. She left the country and everything
Wow.
you know, when our hockey team were trying to qualify for competitions, she had invested all of her life into that zone. She couldn't even look at it. I just think, I suppose, hopefully they trusted me. They learned to trust me early on.
Yeah.
But Jesus, they were all so honest. Like, really nothing got to do with me. I think they wanted to tell their story. Like, there was nobody in the book really, like 95% of them, I think, really were enthusiastic about. Yeah, so if you go through it a bit, like, I won't bore you now, but
No, I have it here in front of me.
Yeah, if you go through it, like Niall Quinn's wife basically did a PhD on the subject.
Yeah, which was very interesting. Like that's, you know, to the extent that it affected their family, that it changed, you know, what she does.
Yeah. Paul McGee went all the way down and all the way back up again. Shane Tupple walked into Roy Keane and said, "I don't want to play anymore for a 5,000 week contract." That's fascinating stuff.
Fascinating.
Kevin Doyle, I'd say you could never take a funk out of Kevin. Like, you know, he's so bloody relaxed and chilled. And again, I couldn't get over how humble and grounded he was. He was a serious international soccer player. And I met him down in Ferrycarrig, I think. And we just chatted away like we were long lost friends.
Wow.
Marcus Horan works Rugby Players Ireland. They're hugely focused on the aftermath for a player. He was fantastic to me. He was brilliant. Tommy came in near the end and like laughed his way through the interview, like in terms of respectfully, like, and
yeah.
So he's happier in where he is now than he ever was. Trevor Hogan is from my hometown in Nina, and I knew of his story, and I knew he went over with the. That's a fascinating. That chapter got no real attention and no real fuss, Julianne, because he was over on a blockade with the. You know yourself, like.
I knew the story a bit too. So actually, that was the second one. I didn't read them in order, and that's I read Paul McGee first, and then I actually went straight to Trevor Hogan.
Yeah, Trevor, because you had an idea. And Donnick O'Callaghan then was like 6 weeks after he retired. He was measuring his urine samples and picking out Smarties out of his dessert, and his wife just told him to cop on. You know, so there's funny stories like that. And with Gary, I'd heard him on radio. Paul Flynn was working for the GPA. They were heavily set. Most of Paul's emails at that time were coming from former players looking to know what to do. The really gas one about Darren O'Neill, the boxer. Darren says in the book, like, I'm not retired, I'm just not boxing. But Darren came out of retirement and fought professionally only a few months ago. So he's still back on the circuit.
Wow. I think boxers and jockeys are very interesting characters anyway, aren't they? Just, you know, they just the nature of what they do. I guess you have to have a different approach to life, maybe.
Yeah, and Paul Carberry went back into a form of like show jumping as well. He's still
which
there.
I didn't know.
Yeah, and then Nikki Simmons, Grania Murphy, Sonia Sullivan, and Lindsay Peat. They all have just different stories, and Lindsay's only just gone. You know, Grania's doing really well for herself professionally now, and Nikki had a complete career change to get away from it, and Sonia couldn't even run a 5K park run in Sydney without losing her mind. You know, about in terms of what am I doing here, like, you know. So and then interspersed the whole way, I found it important that every 4 chapters you'd have a little academic or analysis, a professional opinion, and I kept that short and sweet. You know, but in fairness, like, I didn't want the book like to be like a template or a model book. I wanted to be just a proper book, but I needed that insight there as well. So to analyze what they just heard and to give people takeaways as well, Julianne. So because I felt, to be honest with you, I felt it would be lazy just to stack up 14 chapters back to back. And I wanted to analyze them and dissect them as well.
Yeah, it was a nice kind of another level to it that maybe people wouldn't have been expecting, and you probably didn't need to do, but definitely adds to the book.
Yeah, hopefully.
Is there anything from all the interviews? I presume you did them all in person, did you?
Yeah, Sonia was in Australia, so we did that over the electronics, and met nearly every one of them, and it was like, Jesus, you'd be coming back like emotionally laden down with
I'd
it. Like,
say
you know?
so, yeah. Well, and were you surprised how much they opened up, and was there anything that surprised you that came out, like, through them all, or one single story that, you know, that shocked or surprised you or delighted you?
I couldn't believe the level of detail that they went into, you know, like Paul Flynn, like how he hops up on the scales every day, and if he's over a certain weight, You
And
know,
it
he
was
needs to.
interesting, that's what he missed more. So I would have thought he'd be saying the team and the camaraderie, but it was the discipline and the reason to
Purpose.
train. Yeah, yeah, the purpose.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, I think that every time I doubted myself, I like when you read a chapter 25 times, it has no impact or effect on you. Um, and I did doubt myself along the way, say, is this good enough or whatever? But then you'd be reading back editing again, you say, Jesus, no, the material here is good. Like you just have to
Yeah.
trust it now and let it run. That's what I did I think I said to you, Julianne, for the first 5 or 6 weeks of its run. It was quite like, there was no real hoo-ha about it. And
Yeah.
why would there be? Like it's not a box
Well, I
office
suppose, and it's
blockbuster.
not a current thing, you could read this at any time. It's not, this is the player who just won an All Ireland, or,
Yeah, yeah.
it was a compilation of a lot of
And
things.
and the great thing is, I hear a couple of athletes now referenced it in interviews, or you get the odd tweet sent to you saying, "I've just finished this and I really enjoyed it," and that's a couple of years later, or however
Yeah.
long it's after. I and that's a good reassurance. But like you were wondering the whole way through, is there repetition? Is this going on too much? But no, I suppose you edit it to a point whereby you say, "I'm happy enough with this now." And I actually knew sending it off to the publisher. I said, I don't care what reviews this gets.
You're happy
I'm
with it.
I'm proud of this one now.
Yeah.
Very, very happy with it. And there's a lot to be said for that, because if you don't care what anybody thinks about it, once you're happy, that's sound. And that can apply to any walk of life too.
And has the players or the sports people themselves come back to you? Have you got reactions from them since the publication?
Yeah, like I mean, I wrote a letter to every one of them, and I obviously posted them out a copy of the book. A few of them came back to say they enjoyed it, and like Niall Quinn and Nikki and Gary were great in terms of Marcus Horn. They were great. They helped me. Well, I'd say promote, but they went on live radio with me and live TV, and my God, just the passion was there just to tell their stories
Yeah, because
again.
a
And
lot of it, the work Niall Quinn or they're doing now anyway, kind of ties into your book, so it's nearly a handbook for them.
And Julianne, in the middle of all this, like Niall Quinn was in trying to sort out the FAI.
Yeah,
I mean, I was up in his office in the FAI lines. This man has enough headaches in his life now without talking to the likes of me, but brought me in like, and so that was a strange one being in those offices because
I'd say so at that
yeah,
time. Yeah.
yeah, but like the point was he was interim. I don't know what position he had, but he was in there anyway, trying to help sort things out. And I can't get over the amount of time that they all gave me. I can't get over the help they gave me. They were so sound, so nice, and so humble. Um, but to be honest with you, then we all kind of went our separate ways, Like, and I'd be in touch with two or three of them, but um, I've texted them all or communicated with them all since then. But look, as I say, life goes on. They've told their
Yeah,
story now, and
it's there.
yeah, and I think a lot of them were happy to be included in the book, in this topic, and it just reminded me like I spent half my life begging GAA players for interviews and being turned down. And but some of these people actually wanted to be interviewed, and I couldn't get my head around that at all. It's there, Jesus, I need to broaden my horizons a small bit.
Yeah, yeah. And I thought there was a few of them referenced, that they never thought, what will I do if this doesn't work out? Like Paul Carberry was like,
Yeah,
in a way, I'm kind of jealous. I kind of have a half interest in a load of things. Like, isn't it amazing to be that
yeah,
just
yeah,
focused on one thing? He was never going to do anything else. But then the other side of it is, what do you do when that's gone? Now, I know for him it's not, in that he's still involved in a different way in the sports, but uh,
mm. Look at the heights
it's
he
just
reached, though.
but it goes to show you, it kind of has to come together to be that successful. You have to be so focused on one thing, but then when it's over, it's a very steep drop, I suppose.
Yeah, and I actually initially wanted like the front cover to be like a shot of a stadium behind, and maybe an athlete walking out with the gear bag over their shoulder. And this was the one that they came up with, Julian. That's the front
Yeah, I was
cover.
going to ask you about it. Yeah, it's a
Yeah,
very
so look, I
evocative
mean,
shot.
yeah, and I think when you're not releasing an autobiography blockbuster like with a big title name,
Hmm.
the cover has to be good, the title has to be good, and the bloody content has to be good as well, or otherwise you're not going to move it. And that's the bottom line. These days, like everything is, yourself, everything is box office and big names, and you need to be wary of it. So I thought that worked very well. Now we had a few variations of that, but I think that's the one we settled on it.
And how does the process work? Like, how does it
So
come about?
yeah, so a publisher asked me, and what are you thinking about front cover? And I had given him a few thoughts, and I said it needs to be evocative is the word you mentioned, and that's the word I said too. It needs to be that, and you need to have some semblance of being left alone in a sporting environment. And I said stadium, but they said dressing room. So they got a photographer in Scotland to go and work on that. They got this Agleti looking muscular guy who's obviously a rugby player, and he just head slumped, ponderous. So if you look at that cover there, it's when the world stops watching, life after the game, and you've got a kind of a basic dressing room, and you've got head bowed in a kind of a dark enough setting, and it's a scenario whereby you're contemplating really, and I think the title tells you what the book is all about straight away. And I look at,
Yeah.
you know what, if the book did nothing else, if it meant somebody stop in a bookshop and say, geez, that looks half
What's that
interesting,
about? Yeah.
and if they walked on again, fair enough. But rather than Tom, my story, and
Yeah.
don't get me wrong, I've written autobiographies, but you put your heart and soul into them as well. But a lot of the stories can be repetitive. So I think once you try to do something different, there's a bit of pride to be taken in that as well,
Yeah, and it does capture what we were talking about, just literally being left alone, and it's such a dramatic change in life, no matter. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's an interesting topic, and do you think things are changing, like in terms of how organizations look after players now?
Oh, yeah. And that was one of the 4 sections I brought in. I went out to the Sport Ireland and the Olympic Council of Ireland. I mean, one stat there, Julianne, was after the recent Olympics, not the COVID one now, done before that. The GB won a haul of medals.
Everything,
Don't think
yeah.
they ever got higher, but they had so many cases of depression afterwards. You basically went from being on a podium with a gold medal just to being forgotten about. The next cycle started. So I
Yeah.
think definitely, you can see yourself in the business you're in, Julianne, and like I think the GAA now and other sporting organisations, we're talking a few days before Congress now, and one of the motions would be inclusion, get the associations together. I think there's more of a focus on the player afterwards and the player
Yeah.
outside of the field. That's definitely the case, and it's across the board, and rightly so. And I think that it's probably a conversation that's only just started in the past few years, and I think that hopefully this will be a reference point.
Yeah.
I texted one intercounty player a few weeks ago who retired, and I won't mention his or her name, but they replied back with a picture of the book, this one that their mother had bought them
Wow.
the day before. Yeah, and
Ah, that's interesting.
if you can pull out anything out of that to help you along, isn't that fantastic?
Yeah.
And I think there's going to be more academic works, like Gillian Quinn's thesis is going to be possibly one of the groundbreaking academic pieces, and there's a kind of a reference point here with this book as well. So yeah, I think I can see it myself. It's just gas when you come up with an idea and people say to you all I heard, Jesus, great idea, good idea. That, yeah, nothing about that. You kind of know then before you start writing the book that if you do it
I
right,
have
it
something
could go
here.
somewhere. Yeah,
Yeah.
so it all comes down to that little idea, and people react and say, Jesus, yeah, I never read anything about that. So I think that this book will help that conversation go further, and it has started already.
And we could coming back to it's a great idea, but not everyone that has a great idea can write it. I think I'd be great at doing something like that, but I would how how did you develop your writing style, or do you read a lot of sports books or other how does it come about that you can get it together, but also in a enjoyable, readable, memorable way?
So I've learned over the years, I'm not a natural writer. I've been writing since I'm 16, but I don't think personally I have any great talent or flair at it. That has to stop me for the last 30 years
That's very interesting that you think
from
that.
yeah, from plowing on with it. And I think my strength has always been talking to interesting people, letting them tell their story, and getting out of the way.
Right.
And I think that's a classic example of what this book is all about. I think I've improved definitely on sharpening up and editing as I go along, self-editing. But I've 7 books done. I'm writing my 8, and to me, they're just pure hard work. I don't have any like I could sit down in front of a computer, like, and I can. Don't get me wrong, I can write faster, quicker. Probably, I'm a hard worker, but there's no natural bits of genius coming into my head or anything like that. I am good at getting people to trust me and tell me their story, and I am good at getting out of the way of that. That's how that process started. But really, I'd love to tell you I wrote it all in a month, and it flowed off the top of my head, and it did flow. There's no point in telling you it did flow, but to go back and polish it up several times, like, you know, probably
Yeah.
edited that book about 19 times, Julianne, to be honest with you, you know.
It's
Um,
funny, like even if I had Ty Coakley who had a fiction book based on an All Ireland Hurling Day, and he says the same. You know, it's not glamorous. That, you know, he would be coming from a more creative, I suppose, point because it's fiction. But the same thing, you know, it's the editing afterwards and the changing things around. But I'm kind of glad to hear that it is a bit of hard work, you know, because
oh
you
yeah,
know,
there's no glamour there. Like, Jesus, the word
yeah.
glamour I have, like, you know, no glamour whatsoever. Like, and I think did we even have a launch for that book? I don't think did.
You
No, I don't
mightn't
think
have with the timing
COVID.
of it because it was
Yeah.
COVID. Yeah,
Yeah, we didn't. So I had to do kind
yeah,
of a publicity trail online. There might be a bit of glamour going into TV studios or whatever, but just not really, you
yeah,
know. Like, it's
yeah,
my job as well. So,
yeah.
yeah, no, hard work. Get an idea and see it through. Like, I'd be thick enough like that on myself. I want to start something, you're going to finish it anyway.
And is there anyone you would have loved to get that you
Yeah,
did?
Roy Keane. Yeah, Roy
Oh
Keane.
yeah, of
And I
course.
tried him too. I tried him through Dr. Khan, because they're good friends. But and I tried Paul O'Connell as well. But no, but like, I think they're very, you know, Paul got back to me, just said it wasn't for him. But yeah, I'd love to get Roy Keane. But Roy Keane was a personal hero of mine. But I don't see. Roy
It
probably just
didn't
said like,
matter about the
no,
who it was really. It was the stories, I guess.
yeah, but I like, from what I'm listening to though, you know, because Roy Keane gave Donncha O'Callaghan advice, and I was happy enough to get in there. And his whole advice is like, just get on with it, man. Get over yourself. You know, so
Which is
maybe,
very Roy. Yeah.
yeah, maybe he mightn't have had a whole lot more to say on that subject anyway. So it didn't happen for a reason. I would have liked to get O'Gara as well, but
Hmm.
look, at the end of the day, you put it out there,
But
but
you could
like
keep
I'd say,
going too, couldn't you?
yeah, you could, and like, it's 95% of the people I approached came back and said, yeah, let's go
Yeah.
for it, you know. And in
Well,
fairness to the people that didn't go for it, they're extremely busy, and they're exceptionally well respected, high profile people too. But they're probably in demanding roles still, so
yeah.
they had their reasons too, you know.
Yeah, because we do a Legends Tour series here, where when players
Yes.
retire, you know, they come back and they do a tour of the stadium. And I was trying to think about, you know, from a museum point of view, how would we kind of deal with this? And we have the Hall of Fame as well, which is a nice one because at that stage when you're being inducted, you know, it's 20, 30 years since you've played. So
Mm,
you,
mm,
that's a very interesting one because they're so far removed from the game at this stage and from, you know, fame
yeah.
and they come back. It's a very nice, it's a family thing, and it kind of the pressure is gone. And also, a lot of the players that have been inducted so far didn't play in a time of social media. You know, they didn't have any of that. They, you know, there
I
was a
get
lot
you.
more. You know, they had private lives, and you
Yeah.
know, they just played and they got on with it. So you know,
Yeah.
things have changed. So yeah, I
Yeah.
was just trying to think, you know, what are our dealings with past players here. So that they were the two things that came
Yeah.
to mind. And I've won my last question, so I know I had said half an hour. Um, Paul Flynn, obviously, because of the GA player, was quite interested in his story. Do you know what I found really sad was him watching the final from
Mm,
the box, you know,
mm.
and I hadn't thought about that. That must be terrible. And meeting people, you know, especially in GAA where, you know, you're not shielded as, you know, a former player or anything.
Oh
You're
no.
mixing with everybody. Yeah.
Yeah, you're back out in the Hogan stand, you
Yeah.
know,
If that, you mightn't even
mezzanine
be.
level. Yeah, with
Yeah.
everybody else. Yeah,
Yeah.
that was tough. And like, I thought Paul gave me a fantastic interview,
Yeah. His
Julianne. To
one
be
was
honest with
very
you, he
interesting.
really did. Like, and um, he scurried over to his sister's 50th birthday party that evening, and I think tried to bury himself. No, not bury himself. Get away from all that in the family environment, and get out of there. But you see, he probably, another player might have stuck around and might have maybe got to number 26 and might have got 2 minutes in the All Ireland final. He wasn't going to stick around for that at all, at all. And I think that, uh, see, the other side of it too is there's very few people get to go on the terms that they choose. That's one thing I picked up from it. Like,
Mm,
Kevin Doyle got to call it quits because he was suffering from repeated concussions and he didn't have much choice. but like he was very happy with what he had achieved. Very few, very few others get to do a Brian O'Driscoll on it when they've got a 2-year goodbye.
Yeah.
You know, and I think, look, the mental toughness that got them there in the first place, Julianne, has to come into play then and help bring him back down through the tiers. I think he threw himself into his club. He was, God help his club team, because he was driving them up like military fitness precision. And yeah, but how hard would it have been? Like, and I remember doing Jason Sherlock's book a couple of years back, and he had a similar position whereby he saw Pat Gilroy's era winning All Ireland. He felt he should have been there too, and he took that very, very badly as well. And it has to be like, I wonder how poor Paddy Maher will do this year with Tipperary, because Paddy's career has been, you know, both club and county, he's been stopped now straight away, and hurling would be a massive part of his identity, Julianne. And you know, we'll all have to watch out for Paddy too, in terms of like, just make sure that the structures are there for him. But I think, in fairness, the Players Association and all that, like, have been in touch. And but the point I'm making is, it won't be easy for Paddy to go and see Tip hurling. No. You know, he's going to have to trust himself into coaching, and say, or something else to replace. God help Thurles Golf Club or Tennis Club. He'll be leathering the balls at the net or down the fairways fairly soon. You know.
Yeah, no, it was really enjoyable, and I'm delighted we chose it. So I'm going to finish.
Yeah, thank you very much for choosing it. Anyway, Julie, I'm delighted to chat about it. Like, still, you know.
Thanks so much, and hopefully we'll have your next book now when it comes out. So we'll be looking forward to that.
Yeah, I look forward to that too. Thanks a million, Julianne.
Thank you.